Welcome, everybody. This week's focus is on bringing AI search and assistance to Hyland. So we've done this with a couple other systems, but we have a lot of Hyland clients and partners, and we thought it was important for us to show how we can add what Grooper's been doing to different environments, right? So as normal, I'm Tim McMullen. I've got my team here. Jason's going to be running the show today because he's our expert on ECM. I'm the capture guy. So as normal, any questions you have, everybody's phones are muted. So if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on those while Jason does his thing. So without further ado, the wonderful, the one and only Jason McManus.
The infamous.
Infamous, yeah. That's it. We're all
right. Thank you, Tim. And to start off, just thank you for everyone who's taken the time to attend this session this morning. It looks like we have a pretty good crowd. So I know everybody's busy these days, so it's very much appreciated. And hopefully we'll make this as informative as we possibly can. I won't spend a whole lot of time on info, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason McManus. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at BIS. This is the creator of a platform called Grooper that I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat aware of. And there's a lot of different things that Grooper does. I've spent my career, I think 28 years now, in what we call the enterprise content management space, working with products from companies like Documentum, OpenText, Hyland, Box, Microsoft SharePoint, pretty much all the major, what you would call ECM platforms. So archive, retrieve, workflow, web forms, things of that nature, up to, automation of, human activities, invoice processing and numerous other types of things. But I guess in short, I spent a lot of time in these technologies. And Tim mentioned today's is focused on Hyland, and it is, but it's very specifically focused on OnBase, is the actual products. Hyland also owns Alfresco, which I have some familiarity with, Nuxio, Perceptive, which I also have some familiarity with. And essentially, if you're using any of these technologies, the messaging is the same, because we can do the same thing with what we're going to show you today with the OnBase form. We can do those things with pretty much any ECM solution that you're leveraging out there. And they all have the same shortcomings, in my opinion. So as I mentioned, I've been in the space for 28 years, and I've saw very little evolution in these core platforms up until just a few years ago. They all basically did the same thing, with some slight variations. Some did some things better than the others. OnBase was very good for years with verticalizing the product and having integrations with specific things like Epic in the healthcare space. That was one of the real catches with their product. But the core platform is just really archive and retrieval. So what you're seeing now, and I guess I can, and hopefully everyone's seeing my screen. If anybody isn't seeing my screen, come through the chat because your audio has been muted. And just let Brad and Tim will be monitoring the chat as we go through this. So let us know if you're having any issues hearing me. Let us know if you're having any issues seeing the screen as I kind of bounce through these things. And then also any questions that you have. We have enough people on this that it would be problematic if we had the audio on. So what we try to do is let you just ask questions throughout the session via chat, and then at the end of the session, we'll try to keep about 5 minutes open to address and answer any of those as we get through it. So just making sure everyone is aware of that. But as you see my screen here, I've got an OnBase demo lab that we have set up here that I'm remoted into. And you'll even notice on the screen, we got OnBase Studio, we got the Unity client, we got the web client, we've got the desktop client. So if you're familiar with OnBase, you know that there's a couple different user experiences. Then you've also got the APIs that you can leverage and use to access that environment. But as I mentioned, traditionally it's scan, archive, and retrieve is really what the core platform is for. And you can add workflow and case management and other components to it, but specifically what we're talking about today is search. So if I open up the Unity client, I can come in here and I can kind of see how we've got the file rooms set up, cabinets, however you really kind of want to think of these in your mind, kind of virtualize these things or visualize that. Sorry, is the proper term there. We can come in and set these different buckets up, and each bucket can have a set of index fields associated with it, and that's configurable, by the user. And typically you come in and you set up, one to common best practices. Most people try to keep these under about 20 or so, but you can obviously go more than that. But these are the fields your users are going to use primarily to get to content. And then there are some basic full text capabilities associated with it. But there's no AI enabled in any of this with the traditional platform. There's no way of coming in here and just through natural language prompting it with questions to find data. I've got to know what I'm looking for. So in this case, if I go to the invoices folder, I've got 4 fields that I can leverage and use. values. And I've got things like equal tos. I've got, different types of Boolean logic type conditions I can put in. It helps, but it's very limited, in the scope of how I can filter through millions, in some cases billions of records and get directly to what I'm looking for. The full text is also very limited because it's going to traditionally be limited to machine print data. It's going to have to be very specific fonts. It's going to be clean images. There's just going to be a lot of limitations there. We're going to show you in Grooper how we can AI enable the search for OnBase and other systems, because as I mentioned, this could be pushed out to numerous different applications in the background. But let's say I come in here and I've got an invoice number I want to go look up. I can just type in a number 34543. Sorry, I'm reading this. I wrote this down earlier so I wouldn't forget it. So there we've got a very specific invoice number. We hit find. It finds an invoice for us, and then from here I can view it. I can come over here to my document screen, look at my keywords, and just see how I have an index. And really, that's the limitation right there. These 4 values that we had to collect as we put these documents into this OnBase environment are going to really be the only things I can use to search for this by. And even if I have full text enabled, which I don't think probably many of you do, I think you're probably mostly using what OnBase calls the keyword search. Even if you did have it enabled, you're still going to be limited to how you can use that text. There's not really any conditional logic. There's really nothing other than just finding a very specific word. You can't find words that are 3 or 4 words away from a specific word. You can't find, there's no logic associated with it. So it's just pretty much just snap in a value, do a query, get the document. And if you don't know the value, you're just not going to find it. So if you don't know the PO number, the invoice number, something, an invoice date, yeah, we can use that, but you're probably going to get a lot of invoices for that. It's going to cost your people time. And our goal with everything we do is automation. We want to take down the number of keystrokes it takes your employees to get data into the system, taking down the number of keystrokes it takes your employees to find information in the system. It's all about making them more effective at their job, allowing them to get more done, and letting the technology do those low-level tasks. So if you have $10 an hour tasks, let's let the technology do that so your employees can go focus on the $30, $40, $50 an hour task. That's kind of our goal here. But that's what we call the Unity client, or what you probably call the Unity client, because I believe most everybody on the webinar today are OnBase users, and you're probably more familiar with this user experience than I am. And this is actually the customized version of this. And if you go to our home, we have custom queries, and then we just have basic retrieval. So that was an actual one that was configured to be a little bit more advanced, to actually give me the fields and the format the way I want. I had to set that up. That wasn't out of the box. So the basic one really just would tell me, search for a value, and then here's the document. It wouldn't give me the hit list. It wouldn't give me the information kind of tailored to my specific needs. And again, we're going to show you in Grooper how we can adjust this and make this very specific to what you're looking for. So I know this has kind of been the boring part of this, because I really, before we jump into the fun stuff, wanted you to see what the old experience looked like. And now we're going to reach into this environment with Grooper, and we're going to AI enable the search experience for all these documents. In this particular lab, you'll notice this document I've got up on the screen right here. It's an old Liberty Mutual invoice from 1979. This is part of a really big document set that I downloaded from a public data set that was available. I think it might have come from some litigation, some class action lawsuits. It's like 22,000 plus invoices. I can't do a whole lot with that, or wasn't able to do a whole lot with that with just natively with OnBase. With Grooper, being able to AI enable it, we can do a whole lot more. So let's talk about that. Sorry to pull up. Oops, different lab real quick. And now we're going to get to the fun stuff. So now with Grooper,
the hardest part is us managing our resources.
I thought I had all this teed up, but I probably talked too long there.
Timed out. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll probably need to refresh this. So Grooper is, first of all, it's 100% web enabled. All the user experiences, whether it's administration, whether it's user-based, any kind of configuration you do is all done through a web UI. That's nice because you can do this from any operating system and any web browser. So whereas that Unity client that I was just showing you, there are some limitations there. So I could do this from an iPad, from from a Mac, a Windows device, whatever it might be. And when I come into Grooper, you'll notice that we have this little search icon. So if you're running an older version of Grooper today, if you're already a Grooper user and you're like, well, Jason, my screen doesn't look like that. Well, this was enabled in, I think, 23. Tim, is that the correct version that we put AI search in? I can't remember. 23.1 maybe. So if you're anything older, if you're anything older and that's not there, and you're like, why isn't that there? Well, we just need to get you upgraded to the latest version. So I come in here and I go to my search screen, and right now it's pretty basic looking. And we did that intentionally. We want to make this as simple of a process as possible. And actually, I'm not even in the lab I want to be in. Come over here. And over here on the right-hand side, you'll see we've got a list of drop-down options that you can pick from. So remember in Hyland, we had those different kind of buckets or categories. We had invoices, we had purchase recs, we had HR documents, we had the metadata fields associated with them. Same thing in Grooper, kind of correlates there. All your security can still be set up and controlled. We can still integrate with Active Directory. We can still use AD groups to control who can do what searches inside the environment. But once I get into it, we have a lot of different types of searches we can do. So first thing, let's just do a blank search. Let's look at what all we've got out there. So do a blank search, and I've got 22,593 documents, not pages, but documents in this result set. That's what I had in OnBase when I went in and did that kind of generic search. But it'd be real hard for me in OnBase natively without Grooper to do the things I'm going to show you to find this information. So what I did was I pulled those documents through what we call an AI extract activity with Grooper. So it auto-collected with, almost zero effort on my side, almost no setup time. I didn't have to go through and build any kind of templates. It just used AI to read the documents, and it collected the vendor name, invoice number, invoice date, all this information that you see down here, all this what we would traditionally call metadata. It auto-collected that information. You can see these are ugly, ugly documents. You're going to be really impressed with the things we were able to do. So now I've got not only all that information, but I also have the text. So if I wanted to see the actual text associated with some of these files in the background, I can kind of toggle through and see that information. But we're just going to work with the images today. And now I can go through and use these different search capabilities in Grooper to reach into OnBase and or other systems, because this could be multiple. We can have file shares, we can have FileNet, we could have, like I said, Box, SharePoint, Alfresco, all these different environments this AI search we work with. So now that I've got all this stuff out here and I've collected some metadata, I've got all my text, how can I use Grooper to go query and search for it? Well, I could come up here and I could just do something as simple as just go to the main search box and type in a value like Enid. I know there's documents out there from this company we work with called Enid. I can't remember if they're Enid Parts or Enid Supplier or exactly what their full name is. I just know Enid is associated with them. So I hit my search button. It comes back and it says I found 25 documents that contain Enid as some shape, form, or fashion part of the file. This is something that's different than OnBase. And OnBase, if you want to do a metadata search, you got to go to the metadata field. If you want to do a full text search, you got to go to the full text field. With Grooper, if I want to, I can just do a search, and it searches everything. Vendor name, it'll also search, these files down here don't have a vendor name on them, but it still found them because Enid is printed somewhere on the document. So we'll search all values, vendor name, invoice number, anything, any metadata in any text within the document for the value that I put in this search field if I put it in the way I just did. So basically just do a search for everything possible, all values, all text, and go find that information. That can be valuable if I'm not 100% sure how it was presented on the document. You're going to see some examples of this in a minute. But if I'm looking up specific vendors, it's not really the way I'd want to do it. I don't want to, if I'm looking up Dell, I don't want to find everything that has Dell anywhere on it. I just want to find the ones where the vendor name equals Dell. So how do I do that? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do it. One, if you know how to use our search syntax, you can start typing in something like vendor name. So I type in VEND and notice this value pops up. So it knows that that's one of our values. I can select it, hit equals, and type in Enid Parts. You're not always going to want to have to do that, though. A lot of your users aren't going to want to have to go key in a value like that. Remember what all your fields are. So you also could have queries over here by types, like vendor name. So I click it. And I could have it where it's, saved specific things like, Enid Parts, or you could just have it where you key those in. But I've got it where, Enid Parts, vendor name equals Enid Parts. So before we found 20 plus files for when we just did a search for Enid. Now we find 15 because we're only finding ones where the vendor name equals Enid parts. So this is something that you could do in OnBase. This isn't anything special. But what's kind of cool about this is you can use what we call this little AI helper up here. So you can talk in natural language. And we're going to do some kind of sophisticated searches with this before we're done. But I can come up here and just type in, a question. So I could say, or a statement, find all invoices where the vendor name equals unit parts. So I don't have to know these search syntaxes like leucine and OData, which are what we're using in the background to create this AI search experience. I talk in natural language, and then it converts it to whatever syntax that I need it to be in to execute the search. So notice it does my vendor name equals unit parts, the exact same one that we just executed a minute ago to get this list down here. And again, I can use this to create very sophisticated query syntaxes. So instead of you having to watch me type a lot of these, I've saved some of these so we can just kind of go through these. So what if I wanted to go find all the invoices where my payment terms were 30 days? So I've got one saved over here. So this is the syntax. So I can go out and just do a search. So out of 22,500 invoices, we have 2,158 where payment terms equal 30 days. And all of these, you'll notice there are payment terms over here stating at 30. So if I scroll down this list, they all should equal that. A pretty simple search. Again, that's one that we could potentially do in OnBase if we had payment terms or something we collected. Now, without Grooper, we'd have to key that in for every invoice. With Grooper, that was just automatically collected off the documents as it was ingested. It came in, we got that information. Now we can use that value to go perform a query to find something like this. Well, what if there was something more sophisticated we wanted to look for? Like, what if I wanted to go find all documents for a series of zip codes and that were greater than a specific dollar amount? So again, using my little query helper, I could type in, find all documents where the ship to address contains one of these 4 zip codes and the total amount is greater than $100,000. So that's our syntax it would have created. I execute my search, and now I have 29 records, that search criteria. And if I open up one of these files, you'll notice that my zip code is 27102 in my ship to. 27102 is one of the 4 that we have on the screen. And the other parameter that we put in was that it had to be greater than $100,000. And in this particular case, it was $965,000 was our total amount on this particular one. So both things were met. And if you were to filter through these 29 records, you would find that every single one of them has a ship to address that's one of these 4 that are keyed in up here, and the total amount is greater than $100,000. So again, just by coming up here and hitting this little query helper, typing in what I want it to go find, it builds the syntax, reaches into OnBase, finds all the records that meet my search criteria, and then comes back and finds those files. Very different experience than what I was showing earlier to the Unity client, where I would have to go in and add each one of those individually, and that's assuming that we have the ship to address as one of the parameters that we've collected. Probably didn't, because that'd be a lot of data entry to get all that information in. With Grooper, we auto collect that information, and it gives us all these different search capabilities. So let's do a couple of others that we've got out here. So,
hey, Jason, let me insert and get a question real quick, because I may have misled people. So the batches right now, these have been pulled from Hyland into Grooper, right? And these batches are living in Grooper, or are they still living in Hyland?
Well, you can do either or. So we can do what we call a sparse import, and we could link back to data that's stored in Hyland. We can create copies of them inside of Grooper, which for performance reasons is typically how you're going to want to do this. Right. You're going to want to have a copy of them in both locations. If we just do the sparse, there are some limitations and there's some performance issues that you may bump into. So when I say reach into Hyland, we can set this up so that every time a net new file comes into Hyland, Grooper indexes it, Grooper keeps a copy of it locally in a batch, and it's available. We can do the same thing with all those other systems that I mentioned. That's going to be your ideal scenario. So just in full transparency, you're most likely going to either want to vault them in Grooper, get them out of the source, or you're going to have 2 copies of them to do this. As I mentioned, there are ways around that, but they're not ideal today. There's, like I said, there could be some performance challenges. Does that answer the question, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a follow-up on that is, what if our file store is on AWS has 3 buckets? And it doesn't matter to us because we're pulling it in from OnBase into Grooper. So it would just move into whatever Grooper's file store is. So
Yeah, it uses our integration that we have an API. I think it was built off REST API integration with OnBase. So Grouper doesn't know where the data is stored. If you can retrieve it in OnBase, Grouper can get access to it. So it could be stored in an S3 bucket. It could be just through a UNC path to some kind of local file share. It could be any storage that OnBase could leverage and use. Grouper could get access to it because all Grouper is doing is making an API call to OnBase to fetch and retrieve the images to do the things that it needs to do. So where it's stored and what media it's stored on is really irrelevant to us. We can work with any of it.
And we, for our side, just to remind, we need to be able to map a drive to the Windows machine that Grouper's running on in order to use a file store for it. So I think that limits us with S3, but I need to go double check with Dev on that.
Yeah, and I know it seems like the 30 minutes is getting away from us. So there's quite a few things I want to bump through real quick here. Let's just show you some really advanced stuff. So I've got this search where I noticed the name Kenneth Hicks on a document. And so I just, did a search for Kenneth Hicks, and I'd use the query helper. I said, find all documents that contain Kenneth Hicks. Notice it put the parentheses around it. That's telling it to find that exact phrase. Don't just find Kenneth and or Hicks, find it where it's this way. Now, Grouper will be able to detect maybe a spacing issue where there's an extra space added or space missing. That's part of the AI search capabilities, but you'll notice it found 3 records out of the 200 or 22,000 plus. And one reason I'm showing you this is it's not only, if you look at this check where it found Kenneth Hicks on this particular document, it's not only handwritten, it's cursive, and it found 3 of these. They're all the same. So if I kind of click through these, you'll see, and I don't think Kenneth Hicks is machine printed on any of these. I think it's always in the signature line. Grouper does a fantastic job of searching and finding cursive handwriting on documents. That is something you're not going to do natively in any ECM platform, but especially in OnBase. So again, I know we're kind of crunched for time, but I wanted to show this. And it's not even that it's cursive. It's an ugly document. I mean, it's got a lot of background noise. It's got stuff written above it. The fact that it went and found Kenneth Hicks on that check to me is just mind-boggling. Now, maybe it's because I've been in the industry so long, but it's definitely a big deal. So a couple of other types of searches that we could do. One that I thought was really cool was this one. I noticed that there was a lot of references to Major League Baseball teams on these documents and tobacco companies. So it was obviously a lawsuit that related to tobacco companies and Major League. But I said, I wonder how many records contain reference to these baseball teams. Well, baseball team like the Atlanta, Boston, that's going to be everywhere. That's going to be in addresses. It's going to be referenced all over. So the thing that was unique was their nicknames. So I went in and told my little AI helper, said, find all the documents that reference a Major League Baseball team nickname. I didn't have to type any of these values. Grouper auto created that. It knows that the Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles are the nicknames. I did a search. There's 135 documents that reference one or more of these nicknames. So I click on one, come in here, and sure enough, there's reference to the White Sox, the Indians. As I kind of flip through these, all that information is going to be on, at least one nickname is going to be on every one of these that we pull up. So just another way we can filter through and find these, and we didn't, index the documents by these things. So even things that Grouper doesn't just go auto collect that might be present on the documents, we can still use this search capability to go find those records. Very, very powerful search capability. Again, something you could not do natively, inside of an OnBase. And then another one I noticed, there was a document that referenced blood flow. So I saved this one as well. And again, it's looking for that exact phrase, blood space flow, or any AI variation of it. And if I do that search, I get 3 records. And the reason I showed this one is how ugly this document is. So not only can we go out and read this cursive handwriting or just regular print handwriting, but dirty, ugly documents with dirty, ugly backgrounds, something like this. And I've actually searched for this whole phrase, all these characters, that'll find it. I'm a little lazy here and just typed in, blood flow to quickly and easily find it. So whether it's doing combinations of metadata fields, whether it's doing full text search, whether it's doing handprint search, or combinations of all of these in different variations, you can literally just come up here and just hit this little icon and go type in and tell Grouper what you want to look for in natural language, and it'll build all the syntax you need. Go ahead and do these complicated searches. And since Tim teased you with it, I want to make sure we cover it. Jump over to just another one with resumes. Now, Tim, what was the type of search you were doing for resumes?
So the search was 5 years experience, right?
So were you using the AI helper to generate it? or were
No,
you
I wasn't.
just doing?
I just typed into the search 5 years experience. So I want to find, I'm looking through my resumes. I want to find every resume with more than 5 years experience, right? Which obviously is
Yep.
like all of them because it's doing
Yep.
a straight match, right? So
Yep. So 2,331. But yeah, in that case, but let's do it this way. So that's finding everything with 5 years or experience on it. But now we want to say 5 years experience, exact phrase. Do a search. I always do that. And we go to 10. So from pretty much all of them down to 10. And on all of these, it's going to have that phrase. Now, one of the things I thought was cool with this is, let's say I've got a position open for a new Grooper admin. We just bought this new awesome product called Grooper. We need someone to be an administrator for this. And I know that Grooper uses Active Directory. So find all resumes, reference Active Directory. Okay. So again, you don't, have to know how to key any of these things in. So this one comes back and says, work experience slash responsibilities equal Active Directory. And we've got 6 out there. And I go in here and I'll look at these 6, and on all 6 of these, there's going to be a reference to them somewhere on them having Active Directory experience, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And I can come back and refine this. And I could say, find all resumes that reference Active Directory and SQL Server. Keep adding values to this and kind of filter it down. And again, these aren't things that we index these resumes by. These aren't things that we programmatically told OnBase that we want to collect these values off the documents. These are just things that when we ingested this, and it's, again, I can't overstate this. When we take a large set of information like these resumes, this was another public document set. Grooper just auto collects all this information that you see down here. I didn't have to do any data entry. I didn't programmatically have to go build templates, fuzzy regular expression patterns, key value pairs, any of that. Just using AI, it goes and collects this information automatically off these documents, that whether they're in OnBase or wherever they are, and then also collects all the text off of it. And then I can do all these different search experiences to find this information inside the system. So we got 2 minutes left. So I figure this is probably a good point. I know I talked a lot. I covered a lot. The sad thing is I didn't even cover half of what I would like to show you with AI search, but I figured this is a good point for us to stop and go through any questions that we had.
I think I've kept up with the question. Yeah, I've kept up with the questions. So the big one being obviously where the documents live, using Azure for the index, et cetera. Those are kind of where everything's been. So do me a favor, move over from there to the chat page for this one and do the resume helper. Because what I want to show there, I think we also wanted to go here is, you're on the resume helper. So just add a new chat and type in, find me somebody with 5 years of accounting experience, right? Find a resume with 5 years of accounting experience. Because this is what really woke me up when I was looking at this, right? So when these come back, when these documents come back, and highlight one of these when it gets done. So what's real interesting here, guys, is this is the difference between meaning and direct searches, right? A direct search gets you keywords, it gets you those whatever those keywords or whatever those metadata fields are. But here what we have is a document or a couple documents. So yeah, just highlight that first one. We got a weird thing going on here.
Yeah.
And what you'll notice on this, so now scroll through that, nowhere on here is there something that references I have 5 years experience in accounting. What's had to happen here is, because we're using the LLM, this assistant uses an LLM and the search index to respond to the query that Jason made. So the LLM has inferred the information from the data in the work experience on this resume. Okay, that's where we're talking about this next level goes now, right? Is not only am I able to do a better search, but now I'm able to deploy an assistant with those documents and really be able to interact with it and find, if I had to go find somebody with 10 years experience or 5 years experience through 2,300 resumes, that's going to take me a lot of time, right? So this is just a much simpler way to do that.
Yeah, great point. So you've got your AI search, but then you've also got the chat, which can add value to it as well, where you can go through and it's more logic and true AI being able to come in and answer your questions. So and not only did it find several resumes, but it ranks them. Obviously, the very first person, Daria, has 15 years of accounting experience. Our next one has 14 years. Our next one has 10 years, and very quickly and efficiently, without having to go through and read and just understands these documents. It just comes back and gives me that information, which saves your employees just tons and tons of time. Like I said, the goal here is to make your employees more efficient, through technology and through automation, enabling these things. So you're not just having to go through and open up a whole bunch of documents and thumb through them and read them and understand, well, they started this company at this date, so they have X number of years experience. Nope, just let the technology tell you and sort it and give it back to you in a quickly, easily digestible format.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and what we're not seeing on this one, because obviously there's nowhere for it to zoom in on. But if you did find specific information, we've worked really hard to be able to tie back that information to a link that would be in the footnote, so that you would actually highlight on the document where we found that information. Obviously, in this case, where it's looking at the entire document, that doesn't happen. But you do see that in a lot of our other demos and webinars that we've done. You can see that highlighting in action, right? Because that's critical. How do you trust LLMs? Well, you trust them by handing them a known set of documents, and then us being able to highlight that information where we found it and raise that up to the user makes it really, gives you that level of trust that people are struggling with right now.
Yep. Okay. Well, I apologize. We went a couple minutes over, but it looks like we didn't lose anybody. So I guess that's a good thing. We either kept your attention or y'all are so zoned out you don't know we went over. But yeah. And then we'll send out a link. We recorded this session. So if this is something that you'd like to distribute, share internally, if you think there's some other people at your organization that would be interested in this, let us know. If this is something you'd like to have some more detailed discussions with myself or Tim or anyone from our organization, we would love to schedule a one-on-one session. As I mentioned, this doesn't stop with OnBase. This could be applied to any environment. It doesn't even have to be ECM. This could just be a file share. This could be a OneDrive folder. This could be a number of things that we could AI search enable. These different environments. We'd love to chat with you about it. We'd love to understand your use case and see if we can help architect a solution that would bring more value to your team and your staff, make them more efficient. All right.
Well, thanks, everyone. And if anybody has things that they would like to see, subjects you'd like to see on a webinar, please let me know. I've got my ideas, but it's always great to have ideas from the people who are actually showing up for these things. So appreciate everybody. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for all the comments and the interaction. We generally appreciate you showing up and helping us out with this. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week. And for those of you who are coming out to the office tomorrow to see the IT thing, we'll see you in person. Thanks much. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.